Hey guys, in this video, we're going to cover the similarities and differences between GetStaticProps and GetServerSideProps in Next.js. In both cases, what we are doing is making API calls on the server to ensure that our React components are preloaded with data before they make it to the client. So now let's get into the differences. GetServerSideProps runs at runtime. So this means every time your user loads a page with a GetServerSideProps call, that function will run and your user will have updated data. So this is perfect if you have dynamic data that you want to be viewed by search engines. And the key word here is dynamic. Because this function runs every time a user loads the page, you can rest assured that your users always get the most up-to-date data. Now let's get into a code example so you can see this in action. So as you can see, I have a Next.js application here. And under our pages folder where we run our GetServerSideProps and GetStaticProps function calls, you can see here that I have a page that exports a component called GetServerSideProps example, and there's just some JSX that gets displayed here. And then we have a GetServerSideProps function. So right now, this function will just console.log when it gets run, and we aren't returning any props. If this was an example that you would use in your application, you would make an API call, and then you would get your data, and then return your data in props. And then this props would be passed to your component, and you would be able to render the props within your component. I won't go into that right now, as in this example, I want to show you when exactly this function will run so you can understand the difference between GetServerSideProps and GetStaticProps. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a production build of our next app by running npm run build. And now that our app is built, we're going to run it with npm run start. And our server is started on localhost 3000. So we can see here that I already had the page loaded from before. I'm going to refresh it here, so as if we just visited the page again. And you can see that we're on the GetServerSideProps page. So if we go to our console, we can see that our GetServerSideProps function has been run. And if we go back and refresh the page, or even copy and paste this, we can see that we will have multiple GetServerSideProps calls. And that is because GetServerSideProps runs every single time our component or our page is loaded. So that allows us to populate our pages with dynamic data that is loaded on the server. And one more thing before we move off of this, we do see that the logs here are on our server because we're using npm and node to run our next app. This is on the server. So one key difference is you will not see these logs on the client, which is the console. You can see here we have no logs. And that's because this is on the server, and that's where the function runs. So GetStaticProps runs at build time. Build time is the step in our application deployment process where the React.js code that we write gets transformed into code that the browser can understand. So basically, there is a process that will take all of our React.js code and it'll transform it into vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, the browser can understand those things. So during that process of building, our GetStaticProps functions will be executed. And that will provide the vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript with values with static values that can be displayed to the browser. So we only run our GetStaticProps functions once during that build step, and whatever values we get returned from that will be provided as static data to our application. Now let's see this in code. All right, to see GetStaticProps in progress, let's take a look at this example. So this example follows the same sort of format that we had for GetServerSideProps. We have a page in our Next.js app called GetStaticProps example. That page renders some JSX, and within that page we have our GetStaticProps call. And what we're doing within this call is console.logging this piece of text here so we can see exactly when this function was run. So let's just make our terminal a little bit bigger here and run our build step again. And now if you take a look within our build step, you can see that our console.logs have been executed here. And we have a GetStaticProps call. Now this is different than GetServerSideProps because when GetServerSideProps was run, it did not get run within our build step. It got run after we had turned our application on and were able to receive requests from it. So now let's run our application and go to our GetStaticProps page. So you can see here we are on our GetStaticProps page, and let's refresh this a few times to act like we are users accessing this page. And let's go back to our code. And we can see here within our logs, we do not have any further GetStaticProps calls. Those calls only happened one time when our application was getting built and not any subsequent times. So what that means is any data, any static data that we need to fetch one time, such as a blog post or just default content on our website that doesn't change very often, we can make our API request within our GetStaticProps call, return that through props, and have that displayed in our components. To summarize, that is the difference between GetServerSideProps and GetStaticProps. GetServerSideProps runs at runtime and GetStaticProps runs at build time. One handles dynamic data and the other handles static data. Now remember that you can use both of these functions for different portions of your Next.js app. So you really want to focus in on the use case that you have for that specific page or component and use the proper function accordingly. Thanks for watching and have a great day.